good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to CIBC Presents Entrepreneurship 101. A little course trivia again. Those of you who entered the Upstart competition should all have received your letters. Again, just to remind you, there were 29 submissions, of which 12 go forward. It was, and I know everyone says this, it actually was a very tough call, whittling 29 down to the 12. We actually had a meeting of, I guess, about a dozen advisors, and it took an hour and a half as we negotiated down to the final 12. For those who are continuing on, I think your letter has suggested, hook up again with the advisor that you met and continue on. For those of you who are not continuing on, if you've got any questions or you want any help, you're stuck with me. Again, send an email to the Entrepreneurship 101 at Mars DD website, and I'm going to do, you're not cut off from the resources. I will do my best to continue hooking you up with Mars resources because, again, there are a lot of really good ideas that actually didn't make the cut, and we really want to encourage you to pursue those ideas. So, why pursue those ideas? Well, you pursue them, so hopefully you will get to sit in front of some folks like these gentlemen here. Tonight's lecture, and Peter, remind me, it's a good crowd tonight, and I'm not surprised because the formal topic is basically how to sell to a VC.
How to raise venture capital.
How to raise venture capital, same basic idea. And our leader tonight is Peter Tolnai. Peter is a good friend of Mars. He has done this talk a number of times in a number of different ways. All of them have been immensely entertaining as well as informative. Peter is the founder and president of Orchard Capital Group. It's an angel venture capital fund. Now, he goes back to an MBA from Harvard and a BA from Queens. He actually, his first taste of venture capital, I guess, was in Helix Investments, which demonstrates both his and my age because Helix actually invested in the company that I was running. Two singular things about Helix, and I haven't tested either of them with Peter. One, it was founded and run by Ben Webster, a quite interesting individual. He funded a mission to retrieve artifacts from the Andrea Doria. And he had in his office a dollar bill that had been recovered from the Andrea Doria. The other thing, and Peter, correct me on this, he met with a Swiss inventor who had this really cool idea that he had drawn from plants, from burrs that kind of hooked to one another. And he helped back that, and that's Velcro.
That's correct.
So that will give you an idea of the pedigree of certainly of Helix and the caliber of people that came through that organization. Peter has since been through a variety of groups, Clairvest and so forth, but has a wealth of experience in investing in early stage companies. So I'm going to ask Peter to introduce the two colleagues that he has corralled into coming here tonight. So Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Tony, and it's a little bit scary to hear that history and how long I've been in this business. But anyway, it's great to be here again at Mars leading this discussion. I appreciate everyone attending tonight, and I hope you'll find it informative. Just so you don't have to listen to my solo opinion, I've invited two of my colleagues from the industry to join us, so you'll hear a mix of views and opinions. And this is actually the format we used last year, which I think worked well. So if I could begin by introducing my friend and colleague, Brian Kurtman, who's on my far left. Brian joined Edgestone as a partner in October 2000. At age 19, Brian founded and was president and CEO of Riker Data Systems, which was a technology outsourcing service provider specializing in mission-critical, large-scale transaction systems, which he developed many of Canada's internet banking applications. Brian sold Riker in '94 and went on to manage and be a CEO of a number of technology companies. And he's been actually making venture capital investments since '87. He'll introduce his fund and his investment strategy in a few minutes, but he's been a director of and investor in a wide variety of Canadian IT companies. Rick Siegel, to my immediate left, he's got a very interesting background because he's been an operator and an entrepreneur. He then went to the dark side and was a venture capitalist for 8 years. And is now back as an entrepreneur and a CEO of a high-tech startup. I'd like to quote Rick from some of his blogs, which are quite fun. The one-line bio is this, quote, "I'm a tech guy and my passion is doing the startup thing," unquote. Quote, "I've done the US Air Force, TRW, Aetna, Brightwork, Microsoft, Chapters Online, Microform, and most recently, JLA Ventures. Now I'm the co-founder of Fixmo, a smartphone tools company. I've written books, code, newspaper articles, magazine articles, speeches, presentations, rants, and raves. July 2009 was the conclusion of my VC adventure. For 8 years, I've been doing the voodoo that VCs do, and it's been great. I've realized, though, venture capital is for the most part a spectator sport. You are coached in some cases, but in general, you write the check, do some nurturing, and hope for the growth. I'm not a good spectator. I'm a terrible backseat driver, and I really miss those days of making products and pressing the buttons." So I thought Rick would provide a very good perspective of a guy who's been on both sides of that table, and obviously Brian has the same kind of background. So just so you get a better sense of their respective funds and how they make their investment strategies, Brian, would you mind starting out and giving some background on the Edgestone Venture Fund?
Sure, thanks, Peter. We have just finished investing our second fund, which is a $108 million Canadian information technology fund, where we're looking for products, services that are just about ready for the market or have started with a few customers. It can be pre-revenue, and our size range for the first check can be as low, we say 2 million, but we'll go lower, and as high as 8 million. We're going to be continuing the same strategy for Fund 3, which is scheduled to close next month. The target of that fund is 150 million, with the first close being at 100 million. There's a lot of things we can say that we don't do, but we don't bother doing the don't do's because we will listen, and if it makes sense and it fits our strategy, we will look at it. We take almost every meeting if it fits an initial funnel.
Thanks, Brian. Rick?
Well, I can give you, first of all, I need to remind me to update my blog. I worked for JLA Ventures for 8 years, and JLA last Fund 4 was 125 million bucks. Same basic principles as Brian's fund with from the perspective of IT infrastructure, software. You know, we don't do anything that requires a mask. We don't require anything that requires plastic gloves to touch it. No wet labs kind of thing. So it was all very IT specific. And I also had the fun of helping to work getting the BlackBerry Partners Fund up, which was a $150 million fund focused on mobile investments. And that's a very targeted, they have a mandate of, it's got to be predominantly on a mobile phone or mobile device. It has to provide services that are predominantly mobile in nature. So they don't do, PC kind of things. They don't do infrastructure plays, all those sort of things. And both of those funds are still active. The guys do take meetings. They're one of the things I will tell you about Canada and the VC community in Canada. Some will argue it's closed and it's small and it's whatever, but the nice part is that I don't think I've met in 8, 10 years, 13 years I've been in Canada, a VC that won't take a meeting, which is good. And as long as you're competent, coherent, you can get, and you meet the criteria, which is the most important thing that Brian said, you will get meetings. This notion of you got to know somebody and all the valley kind of nonsense really doesn't apply here in Canada, which is very good news for entrepreneurs.
Correct. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're actually a little bit sort of launched into our first question already. So, how does an entrepreneur pick a VC firm to approach? What homework can they do? And do all VC firms have the same strategy, or how should they pick a fund to start to work with? Brian?
Well, certainly not all funds have the same strategy. And right now, I'd estimate that there are more strategies out there than there are funds to supply those strategies, because the number of available sources of capital, as you've read, has continued to shrink. Getting meetings with the right groups, it doesn't take a lot of homework. I have been quite amazed negatively as to how many people will call us without having gone to our website. We made 10 investments in Fund 2, and we love human capital management. We are 3 for 3 on human capital management. You go to our website, you see what we've been successful at, what we have failed at, and why not check there before picking up the phone? And so it's a little aggravating. We are a small group. We have 5 people that do venture capital at Edgestone, and we don't want to waste your time, and we don't want you to waste our time. So that is not a lot of homework to do before you pick up the phone.
Yeah, and I think, sort of hammer that home, the mistake that you as an entrepreneur make when you cold call somebody and you are not a right fit and it's way off the charts is those guys do talk, right? Everyone, it's a small community. So you're already get minus 10 points for like, okay, no, I don't do those kinds of things. Thanks for calling. And the next time you call someone else, there'll be a party. Did you talk? Yeah, it's like they called. It's like blah, blah, blah. And it's overhead and negative points you don't need. And it is actually really that simple. Every VC firm in Canada has a website. Every VC firm in Canada lists all their investments. Every one of those investments can be Googled. Every one of those things you can find out. And Brian, the Edgestone's site is even more explicit. Here's what we did, and here's what happened to those investments. So you can tell. And it's very, very easy for you to get focused. So it's true. The homework part of that it's simple. I mean, to get that done, but you really, really have to focus on the right guys. And
recognize that the market has and will continue to evolve and change, sometimes negatively, sometimes positively. Right now, I believe we're in a trough. And when we have done 2 co-investments with JLA Ventures, we call JLA and Celtic and the others co-opetition. So sometimes we want to hog the puck on a deal. Oftentimes we want to partner with somebody that adds value to us as an investor and to you as a company. But Rick is right. We're going to talk. Did you just see ABC Widget? We saw a deal last week, projection of 564 million sales in their 3rd year. That'll get around the community, and you might as well not make any more calls.
I think. Okay, so now we've done our homework. We know who we should be calling. What's the best way to approach you? I mean, Rick, you're saying it's easier to get to meetings. Should they send an executive summary by email? Should they send a big business plan, call you up? What's the best way?
The first mistake that you can make is go ahead and send a big 10 megabyte, big PowerPoint, 10 gigabyte. I'm talking megabytes. Wow, 10 gigabyte. Flash demo of this is the greatest widget, sliced bread. It won't happen. No one will look at it. What needs to happen is, and you can do it in a piece of email. It says, "This is who we are. This is what we do. This is the problem we solve, and we think it has potential to be a VC investable company." I've attached a 1-page, emphasis on the number 1, a 1-page reasonable size font summary, and off you go. Keeping in mind that is, if you spam it, people are going to know it. And the list is, and the other thing is, you really, 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 really don't have to send 5 copies to Edgestone. Because if you send it to Brian, Brian, for sure, 100% of the time, because he's a partner, and partner implies transparency in an organization, is going to send it to everybody. So the split second all 5 guys get a copy of it, you're toast. Because it's spam, and it's ridiculous. So you can look at the part, again, 100%, all VCs in Canada, all the partners are there, you typically can get the emails, they're very open about it, phone calls, etc. Pick somebody. Pick somebody that's done something, invested in something that's close to you, right? And pick that one person for that fund. And 7.5 to 9 times out of 10, you'll get a reply, you'll get a call, you'll get a meeting, whatever. That's the proper way to do it, in my opinion.
I agree with all that. As I said earlier, when you check our website, if you have something that is complementary to one of our portfolio companies, like a ShopLogix, or you see that we were successful with a WorkBrain or a Slipstream, and then say, we've got something that we think is complementary. We have just come out of this group that was involved in payroll management. We're a little bit more flexible than Rick may have been with a one-pager. We'll take a couple of pages. We're actually both over 50, so the font size is actually important. I've got the glasses. We have only rejected meetings where somebody has been overly persistent and expects a call back within 48 hours. Did you get my email? You're not always going to get a meeting with all 4 or 5 people who might be in the office. That's not important. If it's really cool, we're looking for stuff. And once a group like ours gets funding, it's our obligation to put it out into good deals. And where you have a really reasonable shot now that you may have not had a few years ago is that the pre-money expectations for most of you, if you're getting decent advice, whether it's from spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever, we used to argue with a pre-money between $40 and $60 million. Now the argument might be between 3 and 4. It used to be valuations were $1 million per PowerPoint slide. Now we actually look at the numbers because we have the time. So if you have something good, people will take the meetings.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so now just continue with that. Is it appropriate for an entrepreneur to initiate discussions with many VCs at once, or do you prefer that they deal exclusively with you?
I think you'd be an idiot to just go exclusive with somebody who hasn't given you a term sheet. You've got to go out to all sources, and it's not just venture capital. We track this because part of fundraising our fundraising is to get investors, pension funds, institutions on board. There were 55 in 2001. There were 55 groups such as ours, JLA, a whole bunch of people wanting to do just information technology investing just in Canada, corporates, labor-sponsored funds, and in 2009 there were 12. That number I'm estimating is going to be 8 by the end of this year, and that's with 2 new entrants. People are going to drop off. If there's only 6 or 8 venture funds that fit information technology, but there's a whole group of high net worths or other angels, you owe it to yourself to go to all of those resources, and nobody is going to be insulted from our side saying, oh, you went over to JLA, you went over to Celtic, you went over to GrowthWorks. If you don't, that will probably be more of a negative than if you did.
Yeah, 100%. You owe it to yourself to hit all sources of capital, especially if you're doing the early stage stuff, because the early stage stuff may be a consortium of angels, it may be a consortium of high net worths, it may be that you're going to take some government grants and then a seed startup from one angel. There's all kinds of permutations when you're raising less than, call it $2 million-ish, and you just have to hit every one of those things, especially because the field is narrow.
Okay, so let's turn a little bit to your decision-making process. What are the 3 factors you consider the most when you're evaluating a deal? The 3 things that are most significant in your mind.
3.
Well, 3 is a good number. You could go to 2 or 4, like the pages.
Well, okay. We have this hokey acronym rule that we use when we evaluate deals and people. And it's called the PEST rule. We invest in PEST, people with passion, experience, speed, and smarts that we trust. And oftentimes when we're looking at something early stage, the E won't be a capital E, it'll be a small e, and that's where we try and come in and supplement it with, there's only 3 people in the founding group and sales is a little weak, or it's a first-time CEO. And if it passes that criteria, then of course we're going to look at, is the market opportunity interesting? And while I said earlier that we invest in Canadian domiciled companies, if the market is only provincial or only Canada, it doesn't pass our filter. We do not care if somebody can dominate Ontario in something. And there's some great businesses. We think they're lifestyle businesses. My old business that I started in 1976 is not a business that we would ever invest in. It took too long to attain certain scale. We needed more scalable and a bigger market run by pests.
Rick, what would you say?
In 8 years, when I look at the deals that I did that were successful and the deals that I did that were unmitigated disasters, the common theme song in there was the people. And I have never been more passionate about the people aspect of this than I was since 8 years. The number one thing that has to be at the table is the right mix of people. And after you get to the people, the next thing is there an actual problem being solved? Right? Is this just a solution looking for a problem, or is this a real problem? And then if I can get past both of those, is it a VC investable business? VC investable businesses are supposed to return, 10x, $100 million, looking for the next Googles. It's high risk, high reward kind of capital. Many, many, many entrepreneurs make the mistake of walking in and saying, oh yeah, in the next 5 years we can make $5 million. Thanks for playing. Right? It just doesn't make the cut. But that filtering system, when you make the mistake as a venture capitalist, you'll make a mistake of being buddy-buddy with the wrong person, right? So that screws up and it skews your investment criteria. Or you drink monumental amounts of technology Kool-Aid, and that just blows your brains out because you're not paying attention to the discipline of the business. Or you become enamored with both of those things and actually buy into, wow, this is going to be a $1 trillion business, when, oops, there was no problem that was actually being solved.
It reminded me, we will never look at a demo on a first meeting. You can get seduced by a demo, seduced by the UI. It's very, very cool. But is there a business here? And UIs can be replicated very, very easily.
Okay, so continuing from this a little bit, how much effort do you think entrepreneurs should put in their financial modeling and forecasting? I mean, do you believe their forecasts, or what do you think on the forecasting thing?
So, again, 8 years, one nailed it.
We had one.
One nailed it.
10 years. One nailed it.
One nailed it.
Yeah.
And hit it and exceeded it, kept going, and it's been like great ever since. So one. The issue with the numbers that I used to look at and we used to argue at the table is, for sure, every venture capitalist on the planet, after they get all your numbers, sit down with their own analysts and go, okay, let's start from the bottom up. Business, this, and okay, do the numbers make sense? Is there a model here that works? There is this belief under the entrepreneurs as well, we have to inflate the numbers because they're going to cut them by half. It's simply not true. What you have to be with your numbers is just believable, because there's an expectation that stuff happens, and there's an expectation that, okay, market forces change in dynamics, but the numbers have to be believable. That, okay, that's attainable if 100% alignment happens on every single thing. And if it doesn't align, okay, it evolves the way these numbers say it should evolve. When you inflate your numbers under the expectation that VCs are going to cut them in half or do whatever they're going to do to the numbers, you're actually undermining Brian's point about trust, right? I have to be able to say, Brian, my best guess is if all the stars align, it's $1 million of revenue in the first year. If these things tweak, this is where it probably can be, because then what he does is he does risk arbitrage. He figures, okay, if he only gets half, that's when he says, if he only gets half of it, it's okay, because it's tracking along some kind of numbers. But that risk arbitrage that Brian does is not an excuse for you to fluff your numbers, so he has to go hack them in half because your believability and credibility that get impacted.
We ignore your revenue numbers. We know the only numbers that are actually going to be accurate are your expenses. Our measures of success are different, though. Our measures of success for most enterprise or the corporate type of software companies are 12 referenceable customers within the first 18 months. We don't care if your revenues are zero. We do know that if we look at your expense line, for sure you're going to hit that. And so we want to make sure there's enough cash in the business to go for 8 quarters. That can affect valuations, which can sometimes send entrepreneurs off looking for other sources of capital. Rick had this at JLA, and everybody has it, where it's a $1 billion market. If we only get 2%, we got a great business. We don't buy any of that. And we also look at the reasonability of the average selling price. So we had this great company in Fund 1 that developed a brilliant technology, signed a contract with a major processor for 3 cents a transaction, when the incumbent service, which was Dial, was charging 1.2 cents, but it was faster and better, just not cheaper. Signed the contract, and the number of transactions was just about 0. Dropped it to 0.8 cents, company took off, but of course that changed the ramp. So for the most part, we ignore revenues, we look at the market opportunity, can you produce this service or product at a price that is profitable within a certain period of time.
The only thing I might add is that I've always thought it very important for management teams to have actually thought through the numbers a little bit. So I've always been amazed when I ask, well, how did you get to these revenues? And you ask some basic questions about pricing, and they don't know what the pricing is going to be. But they still have a revenue line. So it's based on, kind of thin air. And so that kind of is a bit of a concern. I want to see that they've actually thought through the numbers both on the expenses on the revenue side.
One other point, and it comes down to sort of our PEST rule and trust, is the market has changed for us as investors. 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, we were given 48 hours to say yes or no to a special warrants offering at some ridiculous price, no due diligence, no time. You got to go with a gut feel. We have the time now, and we're going to take the time. We're going to make the reference calls to potential customers, existing customers. We're going to give you the venture capital version of a colonoscopy. And it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, if you get a clean bill of health, you have a better chance of getting funded.
That's just be on your website, no?
I don't think so. Although it's now going to be on your website here.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about
management. Colonoscopy.
Yeah, exactly.
Phone 11.
I think we better leave that one alone. Okay, so let's turn to the management teams a little bit. Do you have to have a complete management team when they come to you for funding?
No.
No?
Even the companies that we have now that are running very well, there are holes in the management team. As companies evolve, you can do certain things with founders and early stage management up to 5 million or 10 million, and you have to augment that. If the core group is there, that's great. We're more looking at the cohesiveness of that group. How long have they known each other? Was it just somebody picked up as a CTO from Monster? But no, we don't expect a seasoned, experienced, capital E. It's going to be a small E, we know that. What we absolutely have to have in the management team is domain expertise. I don't know if there's any investment bankers in the group here, but we're not interested in funding a technology company where the CEO is a reformed investment banker and has seen the light and knows how to take 2 and 2 and make 5. Not interested.
Rick, do you want to add to that?
We never, just quick scan, never invested and said, okay, we got the team, let's go. It just normally doesn't happen. Most of you in this room are probably at the co-founder stage, and there becomes a dollar expense. The first X period of time of your company's evolution is really making sure that the dogs lead it. Make sure you've got the right mix of product and marketing and pricing and all those kind of things. There used to be some fundamental arguments. I used to have massive arguments with many of the Valley VCs over they would fund a seed startup with $5 million and say, okay, now we got to go out and hire a $200,000 CFO. Like, to do what? Right? Like my, company, the part-time bookkeeper. Like until it's a number where Price Waterhouse is going to come by and say, okay, they didn't embezzle the money. Like, you got a bookkeeper. So there's not an expectation that you need $1 million worth of executive talent before you ever get out the door. It's just a recipe for disaster.
And the VP sales that's going to take the job at a fledgling company that is sub 1 million in revenues is not the same VP sales that's going to take the job when you're $20 million.
That's right.
And you've got to be prepared to make those decisions, and you do that in conjunction with your investors, which is why, and we haven't actually addressed this question, if you have this great idea and you can take capital from 2 sources rather than 1, that's even better. You get different views. You don't want to get into a party, though, which was fashionable 10 years ago for investors. You're raising $5 million, let's get a whole bunch of great people, because you'll just ultimately get into, it's like being married to 4 people at the same time.
We won't touch that one either. Okay, but I think probably our industry has a bit of a mixed bag reputation about venture capitalists replacing CEOs and replacing members of the management team. What have you seen? What do you prefer? And what's your experience in that? Rick, do you want to kick off with that?
The statistics say that if you have a founding team management, typically the CEO, CTO combination, and you replace those, 60% of the time, you're the walking dead, because you've ripped out the heart of the passion part of the whole thing. This notion that the VCs come in and look at an investment and turn around, the guys leaves and go, it's a great idea, we'll go ahead and invest and get rid of the team, just doesn't happen. Most of the time, either it's, let's wait and we'll be on round 2 to see if they can mature up, or it's, I don't want to do this because the overhead of that team, they're not going to be able to get it over the finish line. Having said that, there is that corollary that you have to be prepared to fire yourself. So I've told every founder I've ever met, never take the CEO title, ever. Never, ever, ever take the CEO title. They don't fire founders, right? They don't. Like, I'm a founder of Fixmo, my company. And I'm telling you today that if we hit a ramp rate of $10 to $15 million and we're rocking and rolling, the first thing I'm going to do is go find a CEO that knows how to do that from the perspective of the mobile industry that I'm at. Because I'm a founder. I can do biz dev tomorrow. I'm here as a founder to make my investors money and my company successful. If you have that mindset, that's what the venture capitalists want to hear about, replacing the management team, because you're doing it for yourself. You're growing the company. You're making the point that says, that's what I do as a founder, not it's my thing and it's egos, and it's like, forget it. Been there, done that. T-shirt wasn't worth buying.
Our statistics are, in Fund 2, we made 10 investments. 7 of the founding CEOs are still there. We are happy with them. In one form or another, by the way, we feel that every CEO is a major piece of work. They're smart individuals, they're driven. So 7 out of 10 are the founding ones. Of the 3 remaining portfolio companies, we've written 1 off. We have sold 1. And the one where we are now on CEO 3 is, I'm going to say, mostly our fault. We were approached by an individual who said, I'm not CEO material. We found a CEO, wrong fit. We brought somebody else in conjunction with the founder, screwed up again. And now we're finally rocking 5 years later, and we are 50% underwater on that investment, but they're finally cash flow positive, so we think we'll do okay. I'm going to, again, I have to watch that everything's recorded. The internet is forever. The notion that CEOs are terminated is not a Canadian phenomenon. It is really a US phenomenon, where we do the A round, we then will bring in an investor. Sometimes we bring in an investor co-investor on the A round, but oftentimes when a company gets to the C round, there isn't sufficient capital in this country to fund a $20 million investment. There's been 1 fund created in the last 6 months that is purporting to do that. They haven't done a deal yet. But when we take our successful companies to market to the US, they're the ones that will come in and say, okay, Toronto, or Ottawa, Winnipeg, we don't know. And they tend to put more pressure on to make changes there.
Right.
Yeah. We're kinder and gentler in Canada.
Let's talk a little bit about industry experts and whether they add real value or credibility to the board. So do you like it when teams show up, when they have industry experts as advisors or board members?
You want me to take that one first? It doesn't affect our interest in investing. It doesn't affect our valuation. It might get your foot in the door if there's somebody on a board, but for the most part, board members of small companies, and certainly advisory board members, are volunteer positions. And often you'll get their airtime sometimes, but it's not a big deal. If the team doesn't have the domain expertise, as I said earlier, then there's no chance. You can't supplement it by saying, I've got friends on my advisory board. Having a list on your, the one pager you're going to send Rick, but I'll take 2, you're not going to have the room to list your 8 advisory board members. It's a very little credibility. When we're looking at the team and we look at what they did in their previous lives, that can have more bearing as to I worked at a Nortel, or I worked at these other places. That's more important.
So I would agree with Brian, and what I used to do is when somebody would come to us and may or may not date me or somehow, I would take the individual's name and I'd toss it into LinkedIn. And I would try to figure out, does this person know anybody in the industry that should or should not be helping them? You sort of don't get that effect when you're in Facebook, but then you get all the pictures of the drinking and whatever. But it's fascinating to me that people don't realize sometimes they have an inherent support network, but at no time other than they might have sped up the introductions. Sometimes some of the advisors, in a couple of cases, have actually done co-investments. I'm thinking like Peter, right, who would be on the advisory board and throw $100,000 into something. So there's some of that where they're putting, the world famous skin in the game commentary. But by and large, it's the team itself. That's not going to push a decision over the fence one way or the other.
I'd rather see them as references than have to be on an advisory board.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't want to see equity bleed out of the company. We've seen some massively painful dilution because people were just too generous and they would hand 2%, 3% to advisory board members, and by the time they got diluted by the first investment, they owned like 3% of their business. It was pretty sad.
Okay, so continuing a little bit from there, how do you feel about family members working in the business? Husbands working with wives, people working with their children.
You take that
Rick,
one first.
do you want to make a comment on that?
Every time I hear that phrase, I'm reminded of the theme song from MASH. Suicide is not painless. It is just, never again. I would cut off my left leg before I would do that. I never. They could come in with $100 million in revenue, $50 million of that to the bottom line. They're paying so much taxes, they're a world hero. I'd turn the investment down because you just have no idea. Lived it, been there, done that.
This is important, by the way, because you'd be surprised how many deals are presented as family teams.
Husband, wife, daughters,
brothers,
in-laws,
sisters, yeah.
Forget about it.
You don't know that my grandma can do the books. It's really incredible. I did a deal that is still theirs in a company where mom was the controller. Right? Said, guys, here's the deal. Investment is not happening until I see that you fired mom, right? And I had to go tell mom, it's really not personal, it's because and just evil eye from moms. And it's not a good thing. No. Would not do the investment with mom running the books. Just not happening. It's also not on the website, but anyway. No. Ryan, do you have anything to add there?
I completely agree. Experience is amazing because the head of a very successful venture fund in the States said it takes $25 million to train a VC, which basically says you got to blow through $25 million making mistakes before you're actually qualified. Aren't too many funds in Canada that can survive that. But we took a healthy hit in Fund 1 backing a family, a big family. I think the starting number of employees was 9 and 4 had the same last name. And we would never do it again because a sibling cannot even reprimand a sibling. And when it comes to compensation and options, the view is absolutely not worth the climb.
I just vision the dinner table where the son, the CEO, was telling mom, you're not getting the raise? No, bad.
Now, we were also lied to. It came out during due diligence where there was a mother-son combination, but because of the way the names worked, like it was a married name, I think, of the mom or something, or a second marriage, and we had no idea there was a relationship, but it just came out by fluke that it was mother-son. So it was a no.
Right.
Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
I think
'cause
that was pretty clear.
It's not even
I think it's pretty clear.
ambiguous.
No.
It would not pass our first filter as long as we knew.
Okay, so how would you characterize the climate for raising venture capital in Canada today, given the economic situation and the sort of dynamics of the venture capital industry? Rick, do you want to give it a go?
Life support. I think it's tough. Part of me says it's really tough, and it's unfortunate because there's some amazing entrepreneurs in Canada. Canada is probably one of the best places on the planet to start a business. The competitive advantages are off the charts. But I will tell you that if I start looking at the guys that are still around, and like Brian, the good guys are actually bubbling up to the top. They are, and that to me is good news. I think a lot of the amateurs are heading home. And it's interesting, when the bubble blew up, we sort of said the same thing about all the entrepreneurs. Okay, now all the kids are going to go back to school, and we're going to get real business people to start writing real businesses. So when the things started to happen after nuclear winter, that started to happen. I kind of feel like, just in my opinion, that you're getting a lot of the guys living off salaries and not really trying to grow massively big, home run kind of VCs. They're going to get nudged out of the business. You're going to see guys like Brian and guys, Celtic and others that are going to be there, albeit it'll be smaller. But my own belief is you're going to see some really solid guys doing some solid work, and the benefit to the economy and the benefit to that is he will in fact take the time, which gives him an opportunity to mitigate his risk, which gives him an opportunity to find a better return, which then says, wow, this guy's really, really good, give him a bigger fund, yada, 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 and it starts to build itself back up. That's what I believe will happen over the next 2 years, 3 years.
Great.
From groups such as yourselves looking for capital, the market is tough. If you have average, if you have garbage, you might as well not bother. And I don't want to say, don't live your dream, but if all you're doing is trying to replicate something else that is out there and it's not innovative, nobody's entitled to funding. And going back to my personal example, which is, again, not VC fundable, I started the business with $1,000. I didn't even think there was venture capital in the 70s. If there was, I'd never heard of it. Never knew there was something called high net worth individuals, because I don't even know if there were high net worth individuals. But it took too long to build that business. If you're looking for, I'm going to guess, sub $2 million, and that is judiciously used for something innovative, I don't think it's as bad out there as people would have you believe. The groups such as ours, and again, those high net worths, the angels, they're looking to deploy capital. The markets have recovered, yes, 60% in the last year, but people believe that may have peaked. People are getting 0.1% on their money sitting in their bank accounts, and they're itching to get back in the game, especially people who have made their money from information technology, from high technology type of applications, and they think they're really smart. They'd like to get back in it, but they're a little older. They don't have the same energy, the same drive as you may have. I don't think it's that bad if it's good. If it's average or garbage, you're just wasting people's time.
Okay, so in a few minutes we'll start asking you if you have any questions for myself or my colleagues here. But just the last question would be, do you have any suggestions or things that we haven't talked about that you think are important messages that you want to
You go first.
provide the audience right now?
I think, again, that my 3 points, if I were going to leave them with you, is number one, Canada is probably the best place on the planet to start and grow a business. There are massive competitive advantages you have through government functions. I just returned from CeBIT, which is a huge trade show in Hanover. And before that show, I was at Mobile World Congress, which is in Barcelona, and in 2 weeks I'm going to be in Las Vegas at CTIA. All three of those shows cost me $6,000 for a booth presence at 3 major trade shows. Sitting in a really bad middle seat with some really loud children cost me $600. Staying in a really crappy hotel with very good schnitzel in Germany cost me $400. So all of that stuff added up. I did 3 major trade shows for $11,000. Okay, it's unheard of. I've got 22 trade commissioners worldwide introducing me to 64 carriers around the globe for my product. Free. Well, the taxes that we paid. So thing number one is, no matter what we say about the size of the VC market or the size of the investment market, the best place on the planet to grow a business is in Canada. The second piece is, you got to have a business that's actually solving a problem. And it's really got to be, and when it's VC, it's got to be solving a huge problem, a big, massive problem. You've got to be out there saying, it's out here and it is a massive opportunity. You have to believe it. And the third thing is, you've got to be friction-free when you're trying to raise capital. One of the most amazing things to me to watch is how people don't realize Brian will get deal fatigue. If you go back and forth with him 100 times on your severance pay and whether you can have a car allowance in a startup, you're toast. If you're arguing over nickels and dimes when it comes to investment, it's ridiculous. When I closed the VC dollars that were in my fund, and the angels, and then there was some VC on top of that, I did one turn of the legal documents, one. I didn't care what was in the legal documents. And I'm an extreme case because I have some experience with this stuff, and I knew 90% of this doesn't matter anyway, right? I mean, if it's going to go down the tubes, who cares? If it goes to the rocket, who cares? So it was friction-free for the VCs. Like, wow, we're done? Yeah, we're done. Closed in a week. We're done. Thank you very much. Those are the kind of things that people want to hear. It's Brian's very good pest thing. I want to do this. You tell me what we've got to do. Let's get it done and move. But it's got to be a big idea, and doing it in Canada already gives you a competitive advantage.
Yeah. Decide if you want to be an employee or an owner. And big differences between those two. You've got to keep your ego in check, which is tough. If you want to be told how smart you are, call your mother, and she'll tell you that you're good looking too. But you've got to build a business that is one that gives the returns, the risk reward that our type of capital or high net worth capital is looking for. If they're just going to look for a 6 or 8% return, they're going to buy a REIT somewhere. And back to the whole aspect of advisors. Rick is very modest. He raised capital in a tough environment for his operation. Our industry is going to miss him. If you guys have him on your advisory board, that certainly gets a meeting because he's not going to take on any crap.
I can't stress it enough that the most important thing, I guess, the difference between the owner of the business and being an employee, if you want to ask me what the scariest thing is about in venture capital, is if that brain flip happens. If you start to think that you're an employee, right? Because you're not, right? You're doing the business. So if the guy that ran Symantec for 20 years gets excited about my business, I'm all over this guy. Please take some of my equity and come and be the CEO of my company, please, here, right? Because now he's going to get me to $1 billion. And I don't know about you, but 5% of $1 billion, I'm good. I'm good. I pass a little out to everybody, everybody's good. And you really have to have that opinion. You really have to do that. And you have to be able to look in the mirror and say, okay, this is fine, right? You have to treat people right. You have to do the right things as a business. And sometimes it means you're going to make the personal sacrifices, and you're not going to take the salary, and you're not going to take these things, and you're going to say to your investors, I'm in. And they're going to look at you and go, okay, that's worth backing.
And it's not right for everybody. I mean, there's going to be people who have come up with an idea, but they've got the mortgage, 2.3 children, and issues that stop them from giving up their salary position in order to chase their dream. Being an owner operator is not for everybody.
Are there any questions that we could answer for you?
Step up to the
Step up to the microphone.
Hi. Thanks for the discussion. Very inspiring. Quick question. For those of us who don't have a lot of time and resources to invest in pitching, what do you recommend if we have a good idea and everything makes sense, but we just don't have time for you? What shall we do?
Sorry, you don't have time to articulate the idea?
We don't have time to spend 1 week for each pitch for 40 VCs.
Pitch takes 30 minutes. You can do it on the back of a napkin if it's an amazingly good idea, because it's about the idea. I have never, ever in my life ever heard of a venture capitalist, an angel, your mother, anybody saying, I won't invest in that because the PowerPoint slides are crappy.
Right.
It's never happened. And it never will happen because it's about the idea.
Oh, I heard that a lot.
Our best deal in Fund 1 was the ugliest presentation that we've ever seen. So if you don't have the time to build a business, then no bother trying to raise the capital. But as far as coming up with a pitch, if you believe in it, you can put something together one weekend. There's a rule that's now used, the 10-20-30 rule. You have 10 slides that take no more than 20 minutes, and you do it in 30-point font. Who was that?
Thank you much. Yeah, that answers it.
Okay. Thanks.
It's a myth or urban legend, what might I say, that you see in Dragon's Den, true for VCs altogether. You guys all looking for 51%. Are you always looking for control? Or what's the...
complete-
Dragon's
That's
Den.
a complete falsehood.
Complete myth.
If we ever have control of a business, something's gone horribly wrong.
Okay,
Exactly.
so
We look for significant ownership. Our target minimum ownership is 15%. Sometimes we don't get there, and that comes down to how much capital is required. The valuation is a derivative of what we think we can sell a business for in a certain number of years, and of course that's a little bit of magic as well. But if we're in a position where we're owning 60%, it means we had to put in more capital because the business screwed up. I don't know of a single fund that buyout funds do that. Edgestone has a buyout fund, and it goes and it buys businesses and it options back 10 or 15% to the vendors and tries to triple that over a 2-4 year period, but not in information technology venture capital. No way.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm really happy to hear about the PowerPoint because I had to do one on Saturday for a pitch, so I'm just going to go with the ugliest one I can put together.
10, 20, 30.
Question
Right.
for you, and I want your insights here on this. Small startup organization, we've been doing 3 years of R&D. We've now got the product ready to go. We went to market. We're looking at 5-fold growth, facing scale up. When or what are your lessons on when you go cash flow positive and how much should be reinvested back in? So that's just what we're balancing right now. We can go cash flow positive if we hold everything right now and we can grow that line, or our inclination is to reinvest heavily so we can go to scale. But then there's always the risk of growing broke.
It's a great question, but I don't have enough information. I don't know the nature of the business, what you would need, like what the use of capital would be, how would you want to scale it up? Is it salespeople? Is it R&D? There's a lot of great lifestyle businesses out there, and being cash flow positive, the only way you can go out of business is if you run out of cash. You can actually, on the bottom line, lose $1 billion like GM did, but they didn't run out of cash, so they're still in business. They got bailed out. If you're in a position where you want to grow this faster and you know that capital will do that, great. But some businesses, capital may not mean anything. Hiring 12 salespeople, giving them $1 million quota does not get you $12 million in sales. It just gets you heartache.
I have a two-part question. How important are patents? And to follow up on that, if there's a good idea but it takes, say, some time to develop the underlying technology, would you consider that prospect?
On the patent side, it depends, but typically patents are a secondary part of the business of IT because the vast majority of IT investments, at least in my experience, have been predominantly wild execution plays that really, really good effectively. This is an amazingly good idea. Zoom, we're there. And the patents do some borders and make some speed bumps to get people, to slow them down a little bit, but it's all about that execution. So for me, that's how we looked at it. We never said, oh, wow, there's 7 patents here or 7 patent pendings, and once we have the patents, all we can do is sit back and sue everybody. Typically, that doesn't happen.
From our similar answer, when we look at patents, we know that early stage companies or ideas groups cannot afford to do the patent work as extensively as you need to. So you may file a patent, but the patent offices are completely overwhelmed. Even being granted a patent doesn't mean you're not violating somebody else's patent. So we put little credibility in it. As far as your second question, if the technology has not been completed yet, then there's very few seed stage, zygote stage funds that you can go to. The group here has them, and we have financed a couple of businesses that have come out of that group, but you're looking for seed stage, which would come from different sources than your conventional venture fund.
There would typically be the NRC IRAP grants for that sort of stuff. There would be, under the assumption they're still doing it, because I don't know, the GrowthWorks' commercialization fund.
I don't know that.
I don't know if they're still active, but that's certainly a place that does that stuff, because we actually did an investment on something that was commercialized out of that. And those are the two places where I would focus, so you have something tangible before you show up to the pro money.
Thank you.
Thanks for this great opportunity. I have two questions. The first one is related. Besides the cash, what are the other benefits of having a venture capitalist as a partner in the business? And the other question is related about what's the benefit, what's the differences of having a VC partner in Canada or in the US?
Okay, I can take that. The advantages aren't as numerous as our websites would have you believe. We do have contacts that you arguably wouldn't have. We lend great credibility to the viability of your business. So when you are, as opposed to a high net worth name, having institutional capital means that when you're trying to sell your way cool mobile application to a carrier who will never get fired for buying from IBM, they're taking a risk. When your organization is backed by institutional capital, makes a big difference. We can help with recruiting. We can help with the sales component, marketing, product, information, stuff that you haven't seen if you haven't lived it. But we're not going to make or break your business. And myself as a venture capitalist, my partners, people at JLA and Celtic, if we wanted to be back in operations, we would. But the workload is way too high, the stress level is way too high, the risks are way too high, and we'd rather mitigate those risks by finding younger, brighter, and more energetic people than ourselves.
I think Brian's 100% correct. The value that a venture capitalist will bring to your business is pretty much around credibility, that okay, it's viable, and it gets you into that next step. Doors don't get slammed in your face like, okay, the guys are, dweebs and whatever, we'll see what happens. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is the difference between VCs in the United States and VCs in Canada are probably degrees of being obnoxious. I am not a big fan and never have been a big fan of venture capitalists that were at one point my colleagues in the US, because they've got Wharton and Harvard and and they do this and they send around and drive their crappy cars in the valley, that earns them the right to abuse an entrepreneur. I'm still of the old school that says I'd rather have a Brian Kerdman who I can sit with Brian and say, what am I do with this engineer? He's going to fire the guy. And what do you think about, because he's actually lived it. He knows what it's like to say, this guy's costing me, or this is a waste of time for me to try to go down this sales path because I'm not going to spend money going down this honor. So he's credible from the perspective he's been an operations guy. The vast majority of the VCs in the US, the internet's forever, I get you. A lot of those guys, they don't have it, right? They're just like, well, let me take a look at your spreadsheet here. Yeah. And your spreadsheet is okay like this, and we sort of did in whatever. And that's not helpful to you.
For the most part, they're financial engineers, which doesn't help. I mean, I ran my business for 19 years. We almost went out of business 3 times. 2 was because of my own ego, and 1 was just because of circumstances, and we were able to skirt around it. You learn a lot from that. You hire a VP sales that you think is brilliant, and if you're a McKinsey grad and VP sales doesn't work out, you flip to page 92 and it says, hire Spencer Stewart to find you another VP sales. It doesn't work that way. So you get the credibility. Again, I'm biased. Our group is made out of operators. I did a year of McGill and 3 weeks at York. So I don't have the letters after my name. I cannot help you on the financial engineering side. but I can get, code monkeys to take care of that.
Yeah, and again, it sounds kind of goofy, but that in and of itself becomes a competitive advantage for you because they will usually always take, in Canada, they'll always take board seats, but you're now getting extra horsepower. You're getting extra brain power. The trick is obviously, he's busy and he's got 12 things he's working on, whatever, so there's a finite amount of that time. That time's valuable. It's not a flip to page 19.
Okay, thank you.
My question, because I'm a student of engineering, so my question would be about technology-based business. How many of the deals that you have done would be about technology-based business?
In the sense of we did it because it was pure technology, and then that's what you mean, just a pure technology?
Yeah, or at least it must be like substantial technology issues involved, right?
I'm going to answer the question a little bit weird. Anybody that goes after pure technology for technology's sake, like this is an amazing piece of technology, is going over a cliff from a financial perspective. And the reason why I say that is I'm taking you back to what's the business? What's the business? What's the gazillion-dollar idea? What's the solution? What's the problem? What's the market size? The technology is merely the enabler for all of that. And taking it from somebody who walked right over the edge of a cliff based on that's cool technology, I'll figure it out later, it is absolutely the worst thing you can do as a venture capitalist. It adds up on the $25 million to figure out how to do it right.
Okay, so if it would be something like FedEx that gets some business done very, very quickly, so you won't care about the technology. If there is idea, there may be some marketing opportunities, you will just do that?
Technology enables the business. It is not in and of itself, at least not in pharmaceutical and those kind of things, but technology is an enabler. And there has been a Twitter, pick one right at random. The technology underlying Twitter as SMS messages has been around since the 70s, right? It's the enablement of all around that. It's not the technology. And it was never pitched as that. The technology around Google, right, is high. The original search engine was algorithms. Okay, but it was the enabler to say, okay, now with that technology I can do A, B, and C. It has absolutely nothing to do with let's go invest in the algorithms and see what we can do. I need to know what problem is that going to solve.
The best piece of technology doesn't always win. Probably half the audience doesn't even know about VHS versus beta, but we wound up with VHS. Now we don't have any of it, but beta was far superior.
I agree. Anyway, great panel, guys. I wanted to thank you for coming. I just was wondering if you happen to know if the gaming industry suits the VC model. It could be mobile, it could be web-based, it could be console-based. Growth industry, but it doesn't really solve any problems, unless you count temporary boredom. So I was wondering if you've ever been approached by anyone starting up something new with interactive gaming.
Well, we actually came close on one deal, and you make a very, very good point. Gaming doesn't solve a problem, but it does create an opportunity, and my 14-year-old and 16-year-old are avid users of that garbage. But there absolutely is a market for it. There's been some very successful investments, ones that produce titles only and don't have an underlying architecture for replication. Then they can be one-hit wonders, and I don't think many funds would take them. And there are accelerators out there now that, because of the iPhone applications where, what is it, $60,000 worth of development, 6 weeks, you got an application, you hope to get, 1 million downloads at $2, walk away with a nice tidy profit, not necessarily VC fundable, but you should not assume from our remarks that gaming is something that people will not look at.
Thank you.
With respect to pitches, you mentioned it doesn't really take that long to do a pitch, that it's important to explain what the problem solved is, and you can quite quickly assess it, and you mentioned the 10, 20, 30 rule.
Right.
My question is, assuming that you'd be interested because you heard the problem solved and you're interested in going the next step, how important, or is it important at all, for the entrepreneur to have the traditional business plan?
Have the traditional...
Have the traditional business plan ready? You know,
Oh, we don't
business
care.
plan in the traditional
We don't care
sense.
at all. We absolutely don't care. We don't need the 30-page. We want to see on those 10 slides the team and background. We want to see the problem being solved, how the technology is enabling it, what the market opportunity is, and competitive analysis. You know, don't come and say you have no competition because you do. And that competition could very well be the status quo. No, we don't. At Edgestone, we don't care about the business plan. It is not, you know, it's very fashionable to say no. I didn't realize you had 2 nostrils when I first met you. Can't do the deal. But you're not going to get a no based on not having a very cool business plan.
I think part of the, well, again, under the internet's forever, if you go to a venture capitalist who sits politely, listens to your story, and says, go ahead and send me your business plan and your forecast model, run from the room. I mean, and run from the room, and if they offer you anything, you know, take it. Like, take the free drinks and keep the glass and whatever. It's just, it is singularly one of the most obnoxious, time-wasting, especially on seats. I can tell you that there are venture capitalists in this city who say they are stage agnostic, who say that they will do anything down to, you know, $1.25, and it is absolutely false, because they don't have the DNA for it, and B, when they say I need a 50-page business plan with a 30-megabyte spreadsheet to determine whether they're going to do something on a pre-revenue basis, they're not doing stage. So it is absolutely not required for the right VCs, because the right VCs are doing that stuff aren't going to require that.
In our fund, if you come up with a scenario you just described, then one of our people will help build that model and say, what do you think the price is going to be? Why? Here's what your competition is charging, and do a bottoms-up analysis that your market is a $0 billion market. No deal. So we're going to do that work as part of our investigation. Again, it's not 10 years ago. We've got plenty of time. If you don't have the time to go through those resources, you shouldn't be trying to raise capital.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Hello. I'm going to be graduating from U of T in June. But I was wondering, you know, for us 21-year-olds, and we are young, the job market kind of sucks right now. How do we get our foot in the door into startups, or where do we go and find
What do you do?
I'm from math and chemistry, so.
Sorry?
Math and chemistry at U of T. I'm going to graduate in June. Do grad school or?
Well, it depends on what your end goal is. If your end goal is to start up a business in the chemistry world, I'd go work for a chemistry company first.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get in startups to see what's going on, figure out what your skill set is, work cheap, because every startup on the planet will take cheap, enthusiastic labor. They'll trade you the experience of being in a startup for your knowledge of helping them get their startups to grow. But the trick there is going to be having that skill set that the startup's going to look for.
Okay, but where do you go find those people?
In this city, it's across Canada. So the first place I would look if I were you was Startup North, startupnorth.ca. And then from there, you'll get links all over the place to the guys that are doing the jobs, because I think it's jobs.startup.north. And all of them will have the interns, the co-ops, Extreme Labs. They have co-op programs where you can come in and basically work for nothing and learn stuff. And
as long as you're willing to work in very close quarters. Have you seen that operation?
It's new.
I know. Whoa.
We moved.
Wow.
We moved.
Sardines.
It's moved. It's not 67 anymore. It's 69.
I'm sure they violate some type of code somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So that was what I would suggest.
Great. Okay.
Questions keep coming.
My question is, it sounds like a sweet deal to be a venture capitalist, and I'm still kind of building my career. So what are your recommendations? Should I try to specialize or generalize?
So you want to be a venture capitalist?
Or work in a company.
Okay.
I don't have the money.
Or work
work in a venture capital firm, yeah.
Okay, so let me give you some perspective of why that's a lousy idea. Because everybody thinks a job is glamorous. Coast to coast, from high-priced partners down to administrative assistants in information technology in this country, there are 65 jobs. That's it. There are 5 at Edgestone. There are what at JLA? 4?
Oh, sorry,
No,
6.
6. There are
Taft and
6
Kevin.
at Celtic. We don't count the labor-sponsored funds that are closed for operations. And you just go across the country, and the only way that you can get a job is if somebody dies. And if somebody dies, there are a whole bunch of ex-VCs that are saying, I'll take that job at half the salary. It is not a frothy market for employment. And the same thing applies on the buyout side. Most of the people who get into the industry either start their own fund, which is tough, or are recruited from industry. But it's akin to my 14-year-old son wants to be a sports broadcaster. Okay, good luck. There's like 6 job openings every decade. Very seriously, it is not an easy market to get into. You'd have to start at the analyst or associate level, much like starting early on in an investment bank. Sorry to be brutal about that one.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
Next question. Once you're really interested and you like the idea and the team and so on, what happens behind the scenes until you get to a term sheet?
Well, you can go on my blog and dig up the 13 steps of what happens. I tried to do. I think if you Google inside the process on the blog thing on Google, I actually listed all that exact stuff out for people. Generally, what happens in a very high level, because it's going to be different for each firm, is a partner is going to take a first meeting. They're may or may not do it with an analyst. They're going to go noodle on it. Go look out the windows, think about it, figure out whether it's exciting or not, see if it fits the mandate, go through those first mental gyrations of all that stuff in maybe 10 minutes. If that gets there, typically most funds have partner meetings on a recurring basis, weekly or bi-weekly or whatever. What's new? What have you seen? Those kind of things. Typically a piece of email will go around so everyone's familiar with what's happening. If you left a PowerPoint deck, it was electronically, that'll get passed around. If people go, wow, this is interesting, you probably get brought back for a second meeting with 1 or 2 or more. It just depends on the size of the fund and what they want to do. If they still think, wow, this is something to enter one of the analysts, they'll crack open the books, they'll do research, they'll start doing what Brian said, call customers, call potential customers, not violating your privacy or whatever, and trying to get a feel for this. The third step is they're going to do reference checks on you. Before you give anybody references, you're going to get Googled, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twittered, whatever, to find out what's going on with you. Then they're going to do an analysis of the market again after going through all of that. You're going to come in for a third time.
He's only up to step 6.
Yeah.
Right.
And all of what I've just described can take anywhere from 3 days to 3 years. I'm being cute to make the point that, one, you have to be prepared for having all your ducks in a row with documentation. You should know there's at least 20 VCs out there that have put up on the thing, here's our due diligence checklist. Here's the things we look for. Being prepared helps. Having an understanding of the ventures firm, asking in the meeting, how do you guys go through the process? Because everybody will tell you. They'll tell you everything I just said, variations on their own system. It is not something that should be undertaken lightly, and it is something that will take up time. And that time may be valuable to you, more valuable generating business than actually chasing the dollars. But that's the process. And the VC is the steward of a whole lot of money. And their responsibility is, we're not going to put this money out the door and put it in any more risk than we have to. We've got an object here to do risk arbitrage to try to balance that high risk, high reward, and it does take time. You'll be amazed at how many times you'll give a venture capitalist 5 reference calls, and it takes 6 weeks because the people don't call you back. It's not my fault. I'm sitting here waiting for your reference calls to call me back. Those kind of things. So, that's sort of a 90-second, and as I said, I've got it all listed out on my blog if you want to be painfully aware of inside the sausage factory.
So I think Tony's, do you want to take one more question, Tony, or do you want to think we should take one more question, please, and then I think we'll...
you got 2 guys, come on.
2 guys, 2 questions.
Come on, 2 guys,
Okay.
2 questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Oh, no, I don't have time for that. I got 12 business cards. I'll throw them out for it. But you can easily find me if you know how to use Google.
My question is how soon or how early of a stage are venture capitalists willing to look at business ideas? Such as if someone has a great idea, not great penetration into the market themselves, but they know what's going on. They've done all the research. Everything looks great. They've researched for a year or so, and they're ready to go forward, but they just haven't, as far as like skin on the ball kind of thing. So how early of a stage?
So the product's not developed?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. So it depends on the fund.
Right.
Our fund doesn't participate in that marketplace. There are seed funds, groups here, angels who do like to play in that market. There are accelerators such as Extreme Labs who will look at something and participate. It'll be a lower dollar participation to get the idea going, and then they'll, if it's successful, they'll try and hand it off to a venture fund. Right. All depends on the fund.
Okay.
Thank you. I work for a software startup, and I was wondering how important is it to have a market analysis or feasibility study done before we approach an investor to validate our numbers and all that stuff? How important is that?
I'd like to go get Gartner to give you an analysis. We've looked at your business.
Yeah, or like a small boutique marketing firm to go out, do some telephone interviews of our target market, find out the gaps and everything like that.
Don't do that.
Nah, it's a waste of money.
Don't do that.
That's a waste.
No.
Now, there could be people in here who do that for a living.
My opinion is the problem with that is that because that's sort of like that fee for hire, you're taking your precious little capital and doing it on that. You need to know the market. And my opinion is that you can go to the York University Library or the Toronto Library, get on a terminal inside either one of those places and get to all the data that is behind the paywall. So every Gartner report, all of that stuff is available in either the public universities, which you've paid tax dollars for, again, competitive advantage kind of thing, or go to the Toronto Public Library, the reference section, bring up Edgar or whatever, there's another one, and you can get all that data, and you can put that data
And you don't have to pay for it. I think that's a very little known fact, is that you don't have to pay the Gartners. You're getting access to their license.
That's right. It's completely free.
Do it yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.